Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us at 10 on air and streaming live. I'm Julie Nelson.
And I'm Kevin Holmes. We'll have all those stories in just a moment, but we begin tonight with strong to severe storms set to arrive in less than 24 hours.
We are expecting some dicey conditions with wind and hail being the biggest threats. It's why we've declared a weather impact alert starting tomorrow night and lasting through Wednesday. Let's get right out to Chief Meteorologist John Ziegler with a closer look at the timing. Hi, John.
Hey, yes, we have a couple of strong storms actually tonight. They've faded here, but yeah, we do have that chance, of course, on Tuesday. Now tonight, it's a warm night. It's a humid, sticky night, but I do believe that our storm threat here for the rest of the evening is done. 74, 79 in Marshall, still 72 in Brainerd. Now we did have this one little cell up here. It was decent. It actually got severe warned, but it was still a popcorn thunderstorm. We did get a report of a funnel cloud. Now this was more of a cold air funnel, not a real funnel. It didn't have a chance to get down to the ground, but I did have a lot of folks sending me photos, and if you want to see what that looked like, I posted on my Facebook page. You're fine though, you're safe. For the rest of the night, we're going to be clear. We're seeing a little bit of activity. You see this cell in Alexandria, nothing to worry about right now. Brainerd, I'm sure you wanted the rain. You could hear it. Pine River, I'm sure you could see it, but you didn't get any of the activity. Back at home, it's a quiet night tonight. We're going to see temperatures dip down. We'll be at 69, 68 degrees. Quick warm up here tomorrow, even a little patchy fog before we get to this stormy stretch of weather. It's going to be Tuesday late after 8 p.m. through the entire day on Wednesday for multiple rounds. We're expecting severe weather. We're going to time this entire thing out for you in your full forecast coming up.
All right. Thank you, John. Tonight, new allegations in the fight against fraud in Minnesota. In a new 200-page report from federal lawmakers, it accuses Governor Walz's administration of not only failing to stop the fraud, but of retaliating against employees who tried to raise concerns. The report from the Republican-led House Oversight Committee stems from months of hearings and investigations. And now lawmakers are calling for closer scrutiny of every state social service program. Raya Katene joins us live to break down that report for us. Raya?
Well, Julie, this report claims that organizations suspected of fraud were still getting funding because some state officials were afraid of litigation or accusations of discrimination. The Department of Justice estimates that $9 billion were lost in fraud in Medicaid-related programs since 2018 here in Minnesota.
This 200-page report by the U.S. House Oversight Committee claims Minnesota's top officials, including Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison, had the power to stop widespread fraud but failed to act. It also claims the Walz administration, quote, retaliated against employees who tried to raise concerns, going to great lengths to keep them quiet.
It's shocking and it's frustrating.
Republican State Representative Kristen Robbins, who chairs the state's Fraud Prevention and Oversight Committee, says the federal report confirms her committee's findings. But a spokesperson for Governor Walz called the Republican-led federal House committee a joke, saying they, quote, continue to rehash COVID-era fraud to distract from endless wars, gas prices, ICE, and the president's insider trading.
Some of the people that they had before the House Oversight Committee, we tried to interview. We called them to testify before our committee, but we didn't have subpoena power.
Robbins points to transcribed interviews within the report with 9 current and former Minnesota state officials that she says contradict previous public statements from state leaders about when they became aware of the fraud.
Those transcribed interviews are really important evidence in this case, and I was really glad to see that they published those.
Attorney General Ellison's press secretary writes, quote, Republicans in Congress issued a report riddled with inaccuracies and misrepresentations in an effort to politicize the issue of fraud instead of actually helping Minnesota protect tax dollars and go after fraudsters, adding that the Attorney General's office does not oversee state social services programs and that the report does not distinguish between the authorities of different government offices and agencies.
And tonight, Vice President J.D. Vance says that he's actually referred the allegations within this report to the DOJ's Fraud Division for potential criminal investigations. Julie.
Right. And so, Raya, do we have any information on the people that Representative Robbins was referring to who her state committee did not get to interview? Do we know who they are or more about their testimony?
Yeah, these are people who previously worked for or are currently working for the state within the human services or the education divisions. And what they were questioned about is mostly the timeline of events. What this committee's trying to find out is if the governor and other state officials were able to know about the fraud, if they did know about the fraud sooner than they were letting on, and if there was anything that they could have done to prevent it. One of these officials that was questioned, whose interview is transcribed within this report, was asked to potentially just speculate on whether the governor would have had this information sooner than he'd let on, and he says if he had to potentially speculate, then yes, that likely was the case. Julie.
All right. Thank you, Raya. Well, if you'd like to read the full federal fraud report yourself, we have a link to it at KARE11.com. You can find it and a comprehensive look at all of our recent fraud coverage at KARE11.com/fraud.
Well, leaders with the Justice Department say the man charged in last summer's Lawmaker attacks will not face a death penalty. Vance Belter accused of dressing as a police officer and killing Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband, plus shooting State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette. A federal grand jury indicted Belter last July on 6 federal charges connected to stalking, murder, and firearms offenses.
Some parents with the students in the state's largest school district are well on their way to gathering enough signatures to put a levy on the ballot this fall. But the school board is saying not so fast. Jennifer Hoff is continuing our coverage of Anoka Hennepin and joins us with more. Jennifer?
Well, Julie, we first told you about the grassroots group called Parents for Good back in March that now says it's pushing forward with an approach rarely used, essentially forcing the board to take up a levy to combat the district's deficit.
Hi there! You guys here to sign our petition?
A lot like today's temperature.
Today is the 8th.
These parents' push for more school funding
Yep, and then just the address.
is really heating up, and Shaylin Burbig couldn't be more proud.
I'm excited to make this move for our schools. Our schools really need it.
She leads the nonprofit Parents for Good, a grassroots group that formed 3 months ago, fighting back against layoffs and a budget deficit across Anoka Hennepin schools. The state's largest district facing a $6 million deficit and has laid off at least 75 employees as the board is split on whether to support a levy, something that hasn't been on the ballot for nearly 10 years.
Can we get one more clipboard over here?
Burbig hoping her group can gather enough signatures, forcing the board to take one up this fall, counting 1,000 so far.
Thanks for carpooling.
Some 600 shy of what she says state law requires by July. Except in a statement, the district writes its lawyers say levies can, quote, only be commenced by action of the school board, and that the petition doesn't require an election to be held.
Even if they don't necessarily agree with us or they don't totally understand it yet, they want us to be able to vote on it. And they think that the community should have a voice in this and not just a few school board members.
No worries, I can take that.
Burbig says the proposed levy would cost an average homeowner about $320 a year.
Thank you so much.
A necessary push, she adds, to support more students.
This is really about them and making sure that they have a good and safe learning environment.
Now, this is pretty nuanced and complicated, but the law that Burbig is relying on was in fact amended back in 2009. And some experts say the part that allowed petitions like this was revoked back then. However, legislative analysts tell me that there are 2 separate statutes. One governs election law as a whole, and then there's another one that focuses mostly on school levies. And the amendment was only made to one of them. So there is an inconsistency there that Burbig says gives her the go-ahead to move forward with this. And then depending on how this all plays out, Julie, could actually come down to a judge making the final decision later this year. So
if
a lot to keep a track of.
Yeah, if they are able to do it, would it be the first time that a parent-led levy has ended up on the ballot? Do you know?
So according to some research, it would date back about 21 years since something like this has happened. And that is in part because that revocation happened back in 2009. But again, depending on what legal experts look at this, they're all sort of interpreting it in different ways.
All right. We'll keep following it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Leaders in Columbia Heights voted unanimously in the last few hours to remove a dozen flock license plate cameras from the city. Every council member cited public trust as their main reason for that decision. The city will now pay out the last year of its contract and stop service. Flock uses automated license plate reader cameras to take a photo of a passing car, compares the license plate to a law enforcement hot list, and then sends an alert when there's a match. But there's growing data sharing and privacy concerns, especially in the wake of Operation Metro Search. Now, in a statement, Flock says when a tool like this is removed, public safety moves backward.